Finally made it. Okay.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is a great day in Indian country, great day on the Cherokee Nation Reservation. We're really happy for you all to be able to be here with us today. We'd like to welcome Danny McCarter today, who is coming to teach us a little bit about Cherokee blowguns and darts and, some other things. So I actually met Danny a while back in the museum. And it's a really awesome place in there, and he does a lot of good work in there also, on behalf of the tribe. So, I just want to say, welcome, Danny. We appreciate you joining us today.
Well, I'm glad to finally make it. Like I said, last time I tried to do this, I was down at the Woodmark, the CMB office at Woodmark, and I could hear you guys talking, and I could even pull you up on the screen, but I couldn't communicate with you. So it is good to be here. This time I decided to come on out here. A lot of the older people will know this as Midwestern Nurseries. But really this, I guess Midwestern Nurseries has been out of business for a long time. But I've been out here to the cultural community outreach once or twice over the years. And, but like Abraham said, I work at the Cherokee Natural History Museum there in town, which is really the old courthouse. And so I used to give tours. That's really what my job was. But really, I'm kind of just a greeter now, and I just tell people, a little bit about Cherokee history there. And so, I've been working at this kind of stuff for a long time. Worked at the Cherokee Heritage Center. That's the thing is that's probably where a lot of us get our start from. As far as learning the culture, some of us get to learn it from our parents and from our grandparents. But the Cherokee Heritage Center itself, we had a lot of our own elders in there. We had Scott Ratcliffe, we had Anna Ratcliffe, Lena Blackbird, Nadine Wilburn. You'll see a lot of these people in the as Cherokee National Treasures from way back. William Cabbage Head, he worked in the village. Dick, the artist Cecil Dick, he worked there. He was a blowgun shooter there, and when it first opened in '67, my uncle, my father's brother, his name was J.C. McCarter. He worked there. He was a fairly young guy at that time. Sammy Steele, sometimes you see him. He's a marble maker, and so the thing about the Heritage Center, it's closed right now, but even working at the History Museum, I get a lot of people who come in will ask me, why is the Heritage Center closed? And the thing about the Heritage Center is the fact that, it's really been the center of our culture it opened in 1967 is when the ancient village opened. And so a lot of those people who come there now came there as small children. They come with their mother and father, or their grandparents brought them there. And now, they're adults now. Now they're bringing their children and their grandchildren. So it's really a generational place. And if you ever spend any time at the Heritage Center, or if you work there, if you've even been a guest there, it's an easy place to fall in love with. I always tease people and say, I grew up there because I was probably 12 years old the first time I started to work there. And then as a teenager, though, you kind of find different things to do. And so I worked there off and on. But my last deal there, I worked for about 6 years. I think I worked from 2012 till 2018. And then I went to work for where I'm at now, working at the old courthouse. And I'm Tahlequah. I've lived here my whole life. I was born at the old Indian Hospital, where the optometry clinic is now for NSU, and most any Cherokee people were born there. up until 1984, and then moved to the new hospital. And the reason I know that is because I had a daughter that was born at that time in 84, and she had to go to Claremore. My girlfriend had to go to Claremore to have her because they were in between. So that's why I know that everything happened after 84 at the new hospital. But like Abraham was saying, I do a lot of classes and demonstrations. Blowguns really is what I'm mostly known for. I mean, if people, I've said that before, that my name is synonymous with the blowgun, and I kind of halfway joking. I don't want people to think that I'm trying to brag about it. I mean, I like the blowgun. I mean, it is a cultural thing for Cherokee people, but the blowgun itself is just so amazing. I mean, once you pick one up and shoot it, it's hard to get away from. And, it is part of our culture. This was really the tool that helped small children keep the animals out of the gardens in the earlier times, because Cherokees are really, we're agricultural. That's the way we've always been, even back in the Southeast where we came from. And around our villages at that time, we had these big, massive gardens that grew around them. And it was really the responsibility of the small children to keep the animals out of the gardens. And so that's really where the blowgun came in. Blowgun's really so amazing. It's kind of a mystery to some people. I mean, because if you try to decide, where it came from, who made it, most people, when they think of blowguns, they think of South Americans, shooting those monkeys out of trees and stuff. But blowguns were used in France as well. They'll tell you about them shooting little clay pellets out of them to kill small animals with. So it's not just the Cherokees that use them. Any agricultural tribe, Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, Seminoles. But the difference between us and the Choctaws is the thistle. Now, we've always used the Scottish or Canadian thistle, and this is what it looks like in its rare form. I mean, you pick those pods off, and then they're put onto, this is a piece of cane that's been split, and then it's tied on there. And that keeps it from busting open, because it always wants to pop open. You see it, it'll be all in the fields, and it'll be all over the place. And so, but, when you pull that white downy part out of the inside of that thistle, then it's rolled onto the dart. And I don't think you guys could see it well enough if I did that for you, but I've done that quite a bit, and you can get on any YouTube channel or something and look up blowgun darts, and they'll show you making them. In North Carolina, that guy, I think his name was Arch is his first name, but it shows him making a blowgun dart as well. So it's something that we've always used. The Choctaws, though, instead of using thistle on the end of their darts, they use raw cotton. And I think there's a little bit more to it. I think it's a little more complicated than the thistle. The thistle is really such a easy plant to use. I mean, because at one time we used the downy feathers of birds. We used rabbit fur. We've used squirrel tail. As a matter of fact, I've seen some squirrel tail blowgun darts. Kind of heavy, but really they work. I mean, anything that'll work, will work. But I mean, for some reason, the thistle is just a natural thing for it. I mean, what the thistle does is when you put it down in the dart, it gives you something to blow against. But not only that, it also kind of keeps your stick centered in there, your shaft, because we'll notice that once those thistles start to wear out, you'll hear that shaft kind of clicking when it hits that thing. So let me give you a little demonstration. I'll try to shoot that white spot. I don't know if you could really even see that, but that's And then here's a little bit of a bigger one. We'll drop it down in there. And I'll try to shoot that. Let me shoot this big piece here. Maybe
Good one. We saw both of them. Most of.
Well, you got to imagine though, a little kid doing that all day long. I mean, how accurate they would get with them. I think DeSoto, who was the first explorer, the first European that we ever ran across, according to stories, according to the history books anyway. And he ran across the Cherokees in what is now the state of North Carolina. And even some of his men talked about the Cherokee men taking down turkeys with their blowguns. And also they talked about their bows. Now, Cherokees were really known for their bows back in the Southeast. Now, this is just kind of a little version of one. This was made by a friend of mine named Jeff Little. And this was more like a kid's bow. And but this one is made from the bodart tree, horse apple, hedge apple, Osage orange. I mean, it's got all different kinds of names. But the wood itself is really, really strong. It's a real bright yellow when it first comes out. But as it starts to age and season, it turns a real dark brown and it turns real hard. So really, you got to kind of keep oiling that. They used bear grease back in the earlier times. Bear grease was kind of it's almost like a lard. It's something that they would bear fat. But to us, it was back in the Southeast where we came from, it was really a big trade item. We traded with all the different tribes in that area. A lot of the Europeans, they really liked the bear grease. It was used, for your hair, for your skin. But we used it for our bows. You rub that on your bow and you hold your bow over the fire and it'll soak into that wood and keep that bow from drying out and keep from breaking. But yeah, bodart wood, they call it ironwood. It's really, it's used for just about everything. I have an Atlatl here that's made from the bodart wood as well. Because this really started out as a bow. A buddy of mine, Steve Darty, he was making a bow and it broke. So he gave me this end of it. And, the Atlatl is really an amazing tool that the Cherokees used it. But I mean, it's a universal tool. I mean, it was invented by the caveman. It's been around for 17,000 years that they know of. They found one in a cave in France that was made from a reindeer antler. And so, I mean, these things were pretty well responsible beside the Ice Age for the extinction of the woolly mammoth and the mastodon. Maybe not one this size. I mean, this one here is pretty small for an Atlatl. It's probably only about 16 inches or so, but I can still throw it probably about 100 yards. And you got to imagine, though, the world record for the Atlatl right now, and there's a little bit of argument about it. One group of people say 282 yards. Another group say 252 yards. But still, you got to imagine over 200 yards. I mean, that's 2 football fields long. And so that's a lot of force. That's a lot of force that's generated by this stick. And like I said, the cavemen were the ones who came up with it. And what they used was a forked stick, and they cut one end of it off. And what they threw at that time, because Atlatl in the Aztec language means spear thrower. But nowadays we don't throw spears. Now these guys threw big, thick spears. I mean, with flint tips on the ends of it. They probably didn't even have any feathers on them because, all they were concerned with was power, trying to penetrate the hide of those tough animals. So, but now, as DeSoto talks about the Native Americans using the Atlatl against them, he said it was a feathered spear they were throwing at them. So, but the Atlatl's been around for, like I said, for thousands of years, and they figured out that it would penetrate like the chain mail that these guys use. Maybe not the big thick thing the Spanish people wore, the armor, but I mean like the chain mail and things like that. And if you get out and throw one, you can throw them pretty fast and pretty quick, and they're pretty accurate. I mean, so you got to imagine if you had 20 or 30 guys with the like 10 darts apiece. That's 300 darts, that they can get out there. Because see, we don't call these spears anymore. We call them darts, because actually what they figured out messing with them was that spears don't bend. They're pretty rigid. So you don't get a lot of distance out of them. But like I said, in the earlier days, they didn't need distance. All they needed was power. They're trying to penetrate that hide. But as we start to get along now we're going up against people with black powder rifles, things like that. I mean, yeah, black powder was a pretty good rifle, but it's not accurate for, a long distance. And you got to imagine if guys are out in a boat on the water trying to get on land, and you're on land and you're throwing these darts at them, you got a pretty good advantage. So, but that's why they started to call them darts, because it's the flexibility really that makes them go. I mean, it's hard if you watch a slow motion thing of somebody shooting a bow or somebody throwing an Atlatl. That thing's really bending, because that's what makes it go. When you throw something stiff, it just kind of, and so, like I said, it's accurate up to a short distance, but these things would be accurate up to a long distance. And on this one, you can tell, now that's a 2-feather fletch. Now, that's a Southeast Woodland Indian trait. We figured out that 2 feathers doesn't really affect the accuracy of the dart or the arrow, but is a lot easier to tie on. And on these here, there's a little dimple on the end. Now that's what catches in this hook right there. Yep. See, whenever you load that thing up, you're just catching that little dimple on the end of that thing. And then you're just throwing it. And so that's how the Atlatl works. It's a very, like I said, it's a very useful tool. I mean, and it's very accurate. It was made way before the bow and arrow. I mean, the bow and arrow came along, and that kind of, I guess, knocked the Atlatl out for the fact that, bows are a lot easier to use. They're, I wouldn't say more accurate. I wouldn't say that. I just have to say that they're more consistent. I mean, your darts go, your arrows go pretty much in the same place all the time. But like I said, the Atlatl, there's more mass to what is behind it. The darts are bigger than the arrows, so there's more mass to them. Now, another thing that Cherokees always talk about now, and that's stickball. Now, these here are stickball sticks that were made for me by a friend named Nate Wolf, and these are made from the bow dart tree as well. Now, most stickball sticks made from hickory. Now, hickory is a wood that's pretty popular, and it grows all through the United States. Now, bow dart. Now, I talk about the Cherokees and the bow dart, things like that, but the only thing about that is bow dart wasn't really quite that, horse apple wasn't really that prevalent back in the Southeast where we came from. Black locust is more prevalent. Now, black locust is probably the thing you would see them use. They would use that to make their bows and their different things. Black locust is in that same family as the horse apple or yellow locust tree, but it wasn't really that prevalent back in the Southeast. But as we start to get closer and then we start to figure out, then bow dart is one of our favorite woods. And plus, people don't really realize this, but bow dart burns hotter than any other kind of wood that you're going to find. It's so dense, it's so hard. I mean, that it burns a lot hotter than just about any kind of wood you can find. But these here are the stickball sticks. Now, any of you that know about stickball, nowadays it's a game. I mean, it's a social game that we play. We play with the girls against the guys. The fishbowl, stickball. And yeah, and it's kind of a courtship game. I mean, really, it came along to kind of so a girl could pick out a husband. Because I mean, when you get out there and you're playing stickball, you know, the guy's got the sticks. Now, girls, they don't get to use the sticks; they have to use their hands. Because some people say it's because they have no rules, and then other people will say it's because girls got too rough. Because you know, it's one of those things that just happens. And so when you get out there and you're playing stickball, see the object of that game is to get that ball between your sticks and hit that fish on top of the pole. I mean, that's your main goal. And the thing about the girls though is you can't touch the girls. You can't. I mean, you know, if they run into you or something like that, then that's fine. But I mean, for you just to target them, and knock them down, or push them down, you'll have to sit down. I mean, when I was a kid and we played at the Heritage Center, when I first started to play, we had some girls that we played with. They were rough. They would pull you down by the hair. We walked around with handprints on our chest and on our face, you know, on our back. And it was a tough game for the guys. I mean, the girls will trip you and knock you down. But I mean, when you win that game, because see, the object of our game was like, you know, hit the fish on top of the pole. And, you know, you have a set amount of points. It's hard to say. People make up their own amount. I mean, I think ours was 11 or 21. That was it. Really, you really just set an amount of points, and then you go out. You know, you hit the fish, that's 3 points. You hit a foot or so below it, and it's better to have a mark when you set that, because otherwise you argue all the time. No, that wasn't, you know, a foot or whatever. So, but we would get out there and play. And, you know, a lot of the younger kids, though, you know, the younger guys, the girls would trip them or knock them down, and then they get mad, you know, throw their sticks down. And so we would just kind of, you know, laugh and say, oh, come on, guys, you know, and, you know, then if they try to tackle the girls or whatever, we have to set them down. You know, you can't play when you do that. I mean, it's really the job of us is to protect our girls. I mean, to make sure and that's hard to do when a girl is knocking you down and slinging you around. But, you know, that's really our job. And so, but stickball, a lot of people, a lot of Cherokees say grandfather lacrosse. And, you know, that goes without saying. But according to the Iroquois, no, lacrosse is a grandfather of stickball. So that's one of the things that goes back and forth. But really, stickball wasn't a game. It was really an alternative to war. We used it to settle disputes between Cherokee towns, tribes in our area. That's how we acquired land. That's how we acquired fishing and hunting rights, was by a game of stickball. Stickball, really, really rough game at that time, though. I mean, you got to imagine you can split somebody's skull pretty easy with a pretty heavy stick. Some people say they had hooks on the end of them, grab each other, and they would do all kinds of stuff. But, you know, and everybody always asks me, well, you know, how could you just keep that from turning into a free-for-all? Well, Cherokees are always diplomatic. So we figured out what we would do is, see, we had villages in those areas that had 2,000 people in them. Then we had villages that only had 300 people in them. So you couldn't go 2,000 against 300. So what we do is, however many the small village puts out there, say they can only put 15 men out there. That's all you can allow from the 2,000 population village. So if they only put 15, you can only put 15. Now, when you put those 15 guys out there, now they're going to face each other, and the guy across from you, now that's your guy. You want to knock him down, you want to rough him up, but you don't actually want to knock him out of the game, because if he goes out of the game, you go out of the game. So see, that kept it even. Well, the only thing about that, though, is we're playing for something pretty important. So if that guy across from me is outrunning me and scoring points, yeah, I'm going to try to knock him out of the game. But then that takes me out of the game. So that's really what stickball was used for in the earlier times, is to settle disputes, because you got to imagine in that southeast region where we controlled about 80 million acres, in an 8-state region of Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, South Carolina. Those 8 states, there were villages all over. So, because we're kind of a free thinking people. I mean, we really don't like to follow the trends that happen. I mean, I think when we started to deal with the British and the French, you know, kind of siding with them, and they were our allies, they didn't understand that. You know, they were like, you know, because they would talk to the war chiefs, and they would tell them, you know, we need you to be here at a certain time with 300 guys. And they, okay. Well, they might show up later on and only have 100. And then the guy, the French commander or whatever might say, we said 300. And then they'd say, well, they didn't want to come. Because, you know, we're really not a forceful people. I mean, we didn't say, hey, you guys got to come with us. You know, if they wanted to come, they would come. And that's kind of our mindset even nowadays. I mean, we're not really a forceful people. I mean, if you think about your grandma and your mom and all them, you know, that they really don't force you to do the things that you do. They tell you a story, or they you know, kind of figure a way to make you think. I mean, like me, you know, I don't cuss as a rule. I mean, I rarely do. And there's a lot of people that are that way as well. But I mean, I don't do that. And one of the reasons why I don't do that is because of a story that my grandma told me when I was a little boy. And she told me that God only gives you so many words that you're going to say in life. For each bad word you say, for each time you make somebody feel bad by the words you say, he'll take 7 words away from you. But for each good word you say, for each time you make somebody feel good by the words you say, he'll add 7 words to it. And see, as a small child, I believed that. I mean, it wasn't until I got to be a little older that I thought, man, you know, that's just a story. But the thing is it already becomes part of your nature. So you just kind of follow that, you know. And they would tell us, you know, don't make fun of people. You know, that's how your kids will come out. So, you know, yeah, that's something easy to think about as you get older, you know. But now, you know, at that time, you know, nobody wants to put a curse on their kids, you know. So you don't make fun of people. And like I said, after a while, that really becomes a big part of your nature. And so Cherokees are always that way. I mean, religion, that's a big part of our life. I mean, I was baptized when I was 7 years old. I can't tell you a time when I didn't believe, when I didn't have the faith, you know, because that's one of the things that we're taught as small children. But yeah, before I go off on that, but like I said, the blowgun. And a buddy of mine, he made these little arrows too that go with that little bow. And you know, like I said, the 2-feather fletch has always been always been the Southeast tradition. And so turkey feathers, you'll see a lot of those. We use the turkey feathers, you know, for dress. When you come to the museum, you'll see some white turkey feathers, and people always ask me, are those things dyed? And I'm like, no, they really come in white. So that's always kind of a thing for them. Trying to think of something else. But yeah, let me.
Danny, would you mind talking a little bit? We had a question about how the blowguns are made. Would you mind talking just a little bit about, you know, kind of the process, what's involved in making a blowgun?
Yep. Well, the thing about that, and I tell people this all the time, when you go down and gather your cane, that's a really important part right there. When you go down and gather your cane, I've been gathering mine over behind the Heritage Center. Well, I guess the people from the Heritage Center have been gathering that cane since the 60s. Because when the old village was built, the old village was opened in 1967. And that's where that cane came from. That cane that they built the huts with and the council house with, that all came from that cane patch behind the Heritage Center. But what you'll do is you'll go down and gather, and you know, you can gather cane any time of the year. You know, you don't have to do it in the summer. You don't have to, you know, I like to go in the fall, except for deer season. I don't like to go out at deer season because a lot of people will shoot at the first thing they hear. But you know, you'll go down there, walk into your cane patch and start looking around. Find, always look for the straightest pieces you can find. I mean, don't just start cutting them, you know, because they're big or whatever. Always try to look them up and make sure that they're straight. Well, and then also look for the notches, because cane will usually grow. It, it'll grow 16, 18 foot. And that's the difference between us and the eastern band of Cherokees in North Carolina. Is around here, big blowgun is probably about 8 or 10 foot. That's a pretty good sized gun. But if you go that way to the southeast, their guns get all the way 16 foot, you know, because their cane grows a lot bigger than ours. It stays big all the way up. See, ours really kind of thins out as it goes to the top. It'll start out on the bottom really thick, and then it'll start to thin out as it goes to the top. Now theirs will stay the same diameter all the way down. So they're able to make longer guns. But whenever you get out there and you start looking at your cane, if you'll look at these notches right here, that's where the leaves come out. Always try to get one that doesn't have anything there. As far up as it can go. A lot of times I'll find the notch that doesn't have a notch on there all the way up to like the 6th notch. And that tells you that's kind of old, that it's an older cane. And then you cut it and always make sure, I take the loppers, like that trim the trees with, look like big scissors, and just get as close to the ground as you can and make sure that when you cut it, that you cut it straight across, because you don't want to leave any spikes sticking up. See, I've seen people with hatchets or machetes, you know, and they'll cut it and then there'll be a big barbed thing sticking up. And, you know, somebody will fall on it, or a deer or whatever's out there running will fall on it. And so you always want to keep that thing pretty even. I mean, you want to be as close to the ground as you can get. Well, and then when you get it, and then you peel the leaves off of it, and then when you haul it out, then, you know, a lot of people like to let it dry. Some people will tie it together really tight and then let it dry, and it'll turn a real pretty brown. You know, it'll start out. This one's kind of been in the house, so it's a little bit green, but this one they'll turn this kind of dark brown color, and that's really pretty. And but then once you figure out how you want. I like to work with green cane myself because it's a lot more forgiving. That brown cane, if you really try to bend it around, sometimes it'll crimp. And even though you can still use it, you'll see that crimp in there all the time. So I like to use green cane. And then once you cut it to the length that you want, and then you're going to have to burn it out, because these notches are the only thing that are filled. This cane is hollow in between here, but the notches are filled. What I do is I'll take a piece of rebar. Usually you can buy it at Lowe's, and it's already cut in 4-foot sections, or you can go to the lumber yard and they sell 20-foot sections, but you can have them cut it up either into 4 5-foot sections or 5 4-foot sections. And you know, depending on what you want to use it for, a 5-foot section is pretty good. I mean, but I wouldn't recommend a 6-foot or something like that, because it's kind of hard to handle. And what you're going to do is you're going to build you a big fire. And the fire is really not what you're concerned with. It's the coals underneath. Yeah, once you burn that fire and it'll start to burn down, you'll see the coals underneath. Stick about that much of that rebar in there in the coals. And then when you pull that out, if you're doing it at night, I like to do it at night, and then you'll see that red glow on there. And you just put it in the end, push it up to that end, and you just kind of twist it a little bit. Don't try to force it. Just hold it against that notch and you'll hear that. Now, if it starts to really sweat and get hot, pull it back out. Because if you don't, it's going to burn the end of the cane. Just hold it against that, and then it'll pop right through. And you just do that all the way through, then turn it over and go back the other way, and then burn it out. And yeah, then kind of let it rest for a bit, kind of look at it, and then kind of, because once it's warmed up, it'll straighten out, it'll bend a little bit. And if it gets really crooked, then you can hold it over the fire wherever it's bent, rolling it like this, and it'll start to sweat. It'll get kind of a wet look to it. And then that's when it's ready, and you can bend it. You can roll it on your knee, or you can push it against something, and that'll straighten it out. And then just keep burning it in and out like that. The more you burn it out, because you want to get that notch out completely. Now, in the old days, they said the old Indians used to split them all the way down, and then take a knife and then trim out that notch. And then they would glue them back together using like a glue made from deer hooves or even like blood and things like that. And then they just tie them together and use them. And I'm sure that would work. If you see, I think it's the South Americans, because they make theirs out of wood, and they have a little drill looking thing that they drill it with, and they'll drill part of it down, and then they'll pour water in there and get all the splinters out there. And then they'll drill it some more, and then they'll pour some water in there, and it kind of just carries out those little wood shavings. And that's how they make their blowguns out there. But yeah, once you get that thing all burned out and all straightened out, though, and the way to take care of it is don't lean that thing against the wall, because if you do, it's going to start to bend. So what you want to do is you want to find a place where the temperature stays constant, like under your bed or something, and lay it down, because you want it to lay flat. And you also want the temperature to stay constant, because river cane is really sensitive. You'll notice that when you get out there in the wintertime, if you do go out in the wintertime or summer, even the summertime, hot summertime, and shoot your blowgun, when you come back into the house, you'll hear it start to crackle. And that's because, it's either expanding or shrinking. So just depending on where you went. And so if it's got any weak spots in it at that point, then that's where it's going to crack. A lot of people will buy a blowgun, hang it on the wall, And if you hang it on the outside wall, probably in 2 or 3 years, when you decide to get it down, it's going to be cracked all the way down, because it's been expanding and shrinking, expanding and shrinking, and then finally it's going to just crack. And I tell a lot of people really that blowguns are like houses, and I say this probably more than once. Blowguns are like houses. If you'll notice, if a house is empty for like a year, that's when things start to go wrong with it. That's when the doors get crooked, things like that, because a house has got to be lived in to really kind of settle. And it's the same way with the blowgun. I mean, if you just lay it down or whatever and you don't mess with it, it'll start to get crooked. Things will start to go wrong with it. Plus, what really puts that shine on the blowgun is the oil off your hands. Yeah, the blowgun has its own oil. It really does. But I mean, it really takes somebody touching that thing all the time to make that oil come out. A lot of the people that make pottery, they'll use green pieces of blowgun or green pieces of river cane to rub on that pottery. And what that does is it takes that oil off of this blowgun and transfers it onto that pottery, and it'll put a shine on it, just like a glaze. So yeah, river cane. Like I said, that's a natural building material for the Cherokees. We use that for everything. Our blowguns, our furniture, our structures. This here is a river cane arrow, and we use the river. Like I said, the river cane is something that we use for everything, not just us. I mean, a lot of the native tribes use it, for their houses and their furniture, their weapons, and so. And they say that's why the Cherokees love river cane so much, is because we model ourselves after river cane, because river cane is one of the toughest, hardiest plants you'll ever find. You can, if you pull it up by the root and transplant it somewhere, it'll grow and it'll expand, because river cane, it grows on risings a lot like grass. And so it'll start to leach out, and that's a lot like the Cherokee people. I mean, you can put us just about anywhere and we're going to survive. We're going to start to expand. I mean, we'll figure something out. I mean, that's really just part of our nature, our adaptability to anything, So let's see. But yeah, like I said, river cane. This here is a river cane arrow, and I myself, I don't want to say that I'm lazy. I mean, I am to a degree. I mean, I'm a procrastinator. I've had a few bows in my days, but I never really made one. Tim Noel Grayson. Everybody pretty well knows Tim. Noel. He's one of our Cherokee National Treasures for the bow and arrow. Been doing it for quite a while. And Tim's always tried to, teach me, or, I'll watch him make a bow or whatever. I just don't have the patience for it, but it's an amazing process. And I can see where a guy would get a lot of satisfaction from it, because, to take a raw piece of wood like that, just cut down the tree, split it into quarters, sections, and then just go to work on it. Finding that growth ring and putting it on that base, that to me is an amazing thing. Because I mean, to you or I, who've never really done a bow, we're just like, what growth ring? What are you talking about? But yeah, I watched Steve Darty, I watched Tim Grayson, or Noel Grayson, and Jeff Little. They'll start working on those things. I just sit there and carve on them, and I'm like, but me, I don't see it. I don't see that ring. And so it's pretty amazing to watch somebody do that. So, but to me, Atlatl, I can get a pretty good thing out of that. I mean, I love to mess with the Atlatl. I love to throw it around. To me, it is an amazing tool as well. It's really more popular up north. I mean, if you go up into the northern states, Maine and those areas, they have a lot of Atlatl contests. I mean, they to them, it's really their association with it and stuff is really big. It's a lot like ours is with like the bow and the blowgun. To them, though, the Atlatl is something that they're pretty familiar with in those areas. Do you have another question, Aram?
Yes, we have one question. And at this time, if anybody would like to ask questions, we appreciate Danny being here with us today, sharing all this, information. Definitely, I've learned a lot. And so, what old Danny? But yeah, everybody, go ahead, and if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A or put them in the chat. It's not every day, that we do get somebody, with this wealth of knowledge here to help us out. So Ken has a question. And this one, you may not be familiar with. He's speaking of prehistoric times.
Okay.
He's saying, speaking of prehistoric, did the Cherokees fish, by laying rocks in a stream or river, like in a V shape, or use a basket, out of twigs or anything? Do you have any knowledge of, them using any of those methods, like fish traps for fishing?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we made fish traps out of river cane, kind of like a big cone looking thing. But we also made them like almost like minnow jars, with the little cone, and they would set those in the creek, because Cherokees always lived around water. Like most people, water is life, and in those creeks they would set those river cane looking baskets in there, And when those fish would swim in there, just like a minnow jar, they can't swim back out because of the funnel. And they would just lift the tops off those and take out what fish they needed. And then they would eat them because, Cherokees, of course, they'll tell you that if you waste food, then you'll go hungry. It's kind of like, if you go to somebody's house and they invite you to eat, you better eat. You can't pass it up because otherwise you'll go hungry. And so that's one of those stories. But there's also another thing that they used to do, and it's illegal now. I mean, I know a lot of people. I've seen people throw the horse apple or walnuts into, put them in a burlap bag and then put them in the water, and it'll kill fish. But at one time, the Cherokees made a powder using the walnut root. They would pull it out and dry it and grind it up, and then would sprinkle out over the water. They would dam up one end of the creek and they'd sprinkle out over the water, and any fish that were in there would just float to the top because it takes the oxygen out of the water. And then they would get the fish, and then when they undam that, and that clean water would run through there, when they go through their gills, they wouldn't. I mean, it'd just bring them back out. It wasn't necessarily kill them; it just kind of take the oxygen away. And that's illegal now, though. But I mean, that's one of the things that they did if they needed a lot of fish at one point. So.
But Danny, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I actually saw, some of my Choctaw friends. They showed me how they would, fish traditionally, and they had clubs, and they would make a triangle and just kind of get closer and closer together, and they were out there clubbing those fish. But yeah, that's really interesting. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danny. So we have another comment from Alan. He says, well, Danny, he says, thank you for sharing this cultural knowledge. He learned how to make blowguns with you at the Heritage Center back in 2008 or 2010. So
yeah,
he said hello.
I had one guy that came all the way from Louisiana one time to take a blowgun class, and then I've had a few from Arkansas who came and taken a class. But yeah, I've done a lot of classes. That was one of the things about this little section here. I'm not used to the Zoom part of it. I'm used to seeing people. If you look on, I think I did one of these for Donnie Saloli, and I did it at the at Cherokee Nation, and I explained stuff like the blowgun and all that stuff, and I think it's on YouTube maybe or something. But I really enjoy it. I mean, I like to get out and talk to people about it, and that's the thing is I can really only tell you the experiences I've had and that I've done, and some of the stories that have been told to me, like from my grandma and my grandpa, because my grandma from my mom's side, really traditional, a Cherokee speaker. She really didn't care to hear anybody talk in English. And she was really a traditional lady, and she had a lot of stories, told a lot of stories. She'd had I wouldn't say she had a hard life, but like most people, that in the older generation, they live a life, but they don't think of themselves they never thought of themselves as poor or, and I'm the same way. I mean, I'm sure at some point that, and I went through some pretty hard times like everybody, but when you're a kid, you don't realize that. You can't, you don't think about it. It's just something that you do. And the only thing that I can really say that kind of shaped me is the fact that, I live from hand to mouth, and a lot of people from Oklahoma are the same way. I mean, because if you check statistics, there's so many, the percentage is so low of people who have savings accounts, in this area, because, I think with me, that's just my nature. I mean, living from hand to mouth. I mean, paycheck to paycheck. I don't know that I could live any other way. I don't feel like I don't love money that much. I mean, I like anybody else, I like to have it when I have it, but if I don't have it, it doesn't really affect me that much. And I think that I wouldn't say that that's really a Cherokee thing, maybe, but most of the Cherokees I know kind of live that same kind of life. I mean, and it's just something that we've grown up with. I mean, I tell people, growing up, I ate beans and potatoes probably every day of my life, just about. And, every now and then, the only thing that changed was the bread that we had. Some days you have biscuits, some days you have fried bread, some days you have cornbread. But really, what's staple is beans and potatoes. And, sometimes you have gravy with it, or sometimes you have fried chicken with it. So, it's just what you grow up with. And, nowadays, though, like my kids or my grandkids, they won't eat something unless it comes out of a sack. It's just the sign of the times is all. Of course, they're big. Nowadays kids get so big. I mean, when I was a kid, 6 foot was big, and that was an adult. But nowadays you go to any elementary or junior high, you'll see a 6 foot kid. They just grow a lot bigger. So.
Well, Danny, I appreciate that. And you know what? I would say that you are definitely a wealthy man. Having this knowledge, and then sharing this knowledge, I think you're right. It is, really a Cherokee way of being. I know people who aren't concerned with money at all. A lot of people, and they're more concerned with learning, with perpetuating our culture, with teaching the next generation. And, that's how we continue to sustain ourselves, and so, I would say you're a wealthy man, and we appreciate it, Danny Woodall.
Yeah. And that's what I always tell my kids, that, some people are more concerned with, raising their children to be, upright and honest, than they are to make money, to live in a big house or drive a new car,
Woodall for that perspective. I appreciate that, Danny. We have Ken, he says, thank you, Danny. You have a deep passion and a joy in this subject. So he says Woodall also. And then we have one last question from Tanya. She says, Woodall, Tanya Wapskinny. She said, Woodall, my grandpa William Foster made bows. I never asked him, but is this just for men traditionally?
I don't think so. I mean, like I said, as Cherokees, women are a big part of our society. And so I think that if women decided that, that's what they wanted to do, then, we, being a matrilineal tribe, we trace all our lineage through the mothers and through the women. So, a lot of people never understood that. The British and the French, they used to say we had a petticoat government because, we listened to our women, because for one, they knew how much land we needed to sustain our village because, they were the ones who worked the gardens. Maybe we dug them up and started them, but they were the ones who maintained them. And so whenever we would go to trade with other tribes or with the British, the French, or whoever, they used to always say, why do those Cherokees always bring their women with them? And we would look at them and say, why don't these guys have any women with them? Because, women are, you don't have a society without women. And we realized that at an early time. And if you want your children to be strong, your women have to be strong as well.
Well, Danny, I appreciate that. So, and then from Beth Kelly, she says, thank you so much. That was awesome to hear.
Well, I'm glad.
All right. Well, Danny, we, like I said, we really appreciate you, being with us today and sharing this. From Brienne, she says, Woodall, for sharing all of this about blowguns and so much more.
Oh, good. I'm glad everybody enjoyed that. I mean, I enjoyed it as well. I always like to talk about, Cherokees. I like to talk about the history, and sometimes it's kind of tough. I mean, because times change, times are different. I mean, it's kind of like I was telling them, when I was a kid, we always believed whatever our parents told us, whatever our grandparents tell us, and no matter how far it was, we're like, okay. But me, kids nowadays are so educated, that they question everything. The stories that I was told as a youngster, I can tell to my kids, and they kind of roll their eyes. Oh man, Dad, we got to listen to this again. So that's how much the world has changed. And when you get older, like I didn't realize this, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, how my thought process would be the same as my grandparents.
Oh, yeah, I definitely see that. And, as the more things change, though, the more I love to see that Cherokee culture, a lot of it stays the same.
Right.
Our values, our traditions, I think that's really important, and passing it along to these kids. Definitely. You're right. So from Roberta, she writes, she said, thank you for your knowledge and for giving us this cultural history. So
good.
That's from Roberta.
Yeah, I'm always glad to talk about culture and history. I mean, that's.
So where can people come and see you if they wanted to talk to you a little more? Where can they come and find you at?
They can come to the Cherokee National History Museum, which is really the old courthouse down on the square in Tahlequah. And we're open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4.
Awesome.
So, so I'm usually there. I don't give tours. Like I said, after the COVID came along, I don't really give tours through there, but I tell people stories, if somebody wants to know something and about, Cherokee history, culture, stickball, whatever, I'll usually tell them. We've been having the North Carolina people come. We've had, I think like 2-3 visits from them. And since COVID's kind of slowed down, and they're really trying to start some immersion type schools and some master apprentice programs of their own, because their language is a little more threatened. Their Cherokee language is a little more threatened where they're at than us. And they've seen what good work the nation has done doing this, so they're hoping to kind of incorporate that into their tribe as well.
Austin, that's great. And like I said, I first saw you over there at the museum. We had the Mayan delegation came through, and I was speaking with them, and they talked about the blowgun that was in there and said how similar it was to theirs, down in South America. So that was pretty cool to hear. Yeah,
it is. It's always something when we figure out a connection between Native Americans and other tribes.
All right. Well, we're going to let you get to lunch now.
All right,
Danny, we really appreciate it. And anytime you want to come back and join us again, we'd love to have you.
Okay. Well, y'all just let me know.
All right. Well, everybody, have a good day.
Bye-bye.